But this is where we get to the bit that is perhaps a bit controversial. Is there a contradiction here? Look at verse 21 again. He's considered righteous for what? Well, when he did something, he offered up his son Isaac on the altar. Genesis 22. Verse 24, the summary of it is, a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. Now, if you've been part of our church for any length of time, hopefully you will have heard that being saved, being a Christian, being a follower of Jesus is about grace, about what's been done for us by God sending his son Jesus to die on the cross. It's about faith. Salvation is by faith, trusting, believing in that promise, receiving that promise for ourselves. The Apostle Paul says we're saved not by works of the law, but by faith. And yet James here seems to be saying the opposite. We're saved by the things that we do and not just by our faith. Is there a contradiction here? How do we sort of reconcile these things? Well, I think the answer, the solution, is in verse 23. Scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. You might have a little footnote at that point. I do in my Bible. And that says, that is a quote from Genesis 15, verse 6. Now, the story here is God says to Abraham and Sarah, you're going to have as many descendants as there are stars in the sky. Go out, go out your house, look up. So he looks up. He's sort of numbering them all. And he believes God's promise. Sees all the stars in the sky and he believes God's promise. And that faith, that trust of God's promise is considered by God as righteousness. God gives him a righteous status before him, that he's right before God because of his trust in God. That's Genesis 15. Now, verse 21 of our passage talked about a time when Abraham offered his son Isaac up on the altar. If you know that story, that's Genesis 22. That's significant. I'm not very good at maths, as this week's homeschooling has indicated, but I know that if I was counting from 0 to 22, that 15 comes before 22 and not after 22. That's a correct statement. The point is, Abraham was counted righteous in chapter 15 by faith, not in chapter 22 when he demonstrated that faith. He was already righteous by the time he got to chapter 22. The point is, Abraham showed his faith. He demonstrated his faith. He lived it out in chapter 22, a faith that he already had, a righteous status that he already had in chapter 15. We are saved by grace alone, by faith. There is no contradiction here.